Good evening, everyone. Time for another silver update. This is the 30-minute chart of silver provided by netdania.com. You can click on the link below. Now, I've drawn out a number of trend lines and support lines. As I did on the charts on the blog today, I pointed out the stair-step behavior that we're beginning to go through. You can see here's one step here. There's another one here. This is a typical pattern that you see in bull markets, and of course that goes along with the MACD pattern that we see down below. As I pointed out with the MACD, that's my favorite indicator, and the reason why is because it's a trending indicator. It's an indicator that works during trends. It does not work during sideways movements. Now you can see the arrows that I pointed here are the top 4 major sell signals on the MACD. You can see we got a sell signal right here, and that corresponds to this price, which was rapidly overrun to the upside until we got another sell signal here. Again, that price was overrun to the upside, and we got another sell signal here, and that was overrun to the upside. Now we've got a sell signal here, and you can see that's actually the strongest sell signal we've gotten, and it's also the worst sell signal we've gotten. It was immediately overrun to the upside. Now on the other hand, the buy signals are very strong. There's a buy signal there. This buy signal is not so valid, but there's a buy signal here, a buy signal here, a buy signal here. So clearly the buy signals are more valid than the sell signals. Now the question is, are we going to get another buy signal? Is this the buy signal, or are we going to go lower and get another buy signal? If we do get another buy signal and just go up like this at this point, you can see the price has corrected so little that we would have a continuation of the pattern that we've been having, which is rallying very sharply on strength and falling back very little on weakness. So as I've said in the last few days, it's quite possible that we could get a move up to 36, up to this 37.50 level, and even penetrating that. You can see the overbought level that we were at was about 3, and you can see we've just crossed 1. So it is possible for us to reach that type of overbought territory. Markets can actually stay overbought for a long time. As you can see in the monthly, we went into overbought territory here back in early 2006, and you can see we actually stayed in overbought territory for 2 full years before the 2008 breakdown. So it's quite possible that we will reach a very high overbought condition, much higher than we are right now. Now I want to take you over to the gold chart because although the daily is starting to break out to significant, well, not significant, but a decent overbought price. You can see the overbought price here was 70. We're reaching 22. But the strength that's in the gold market right now is shown by the weekly MACD. And this is what I was calling, if you remember, I drew out the pennant formation that was forming, and I was expecting a break to the upside. That is what we got. Now if we go in and move in a lot closer to the MACD here, you can see we've just crossed the 0 line with the red line here. The blue line still in negative territory. So these points where we cross, you can see the cross of the 0 line between those two is right here. It amounted to a pretty big spike up to old highs and a little fall off, and then that was the beginning of this tremendous rally. So we could be looking at something like that here as we begin to cross through that 0 line. That's often some of the most powerful moves. So it really is quite possible that between now and through the year, we're just going to do a continuous ascent in the price of gold and the price of silver. So with that in mind, a lot of people like to look for pullbacks, but sometimes you don't get any pullbacks. So I want to cover what's available right now. And so what I did was I went ahead and hit my three favorites, and that's going to be APMEX, Gainesville, and Provident Metals. And I went and picked out what I consider to be, in my opinion, using the criteria that I use. And of course, that criteria is 1 ounce, for the most part, 1 ounce coins generally by national mints, although they don't have to be, and artistic merit, numismatic value, and then of course low markup. So the favorite that I found today on APMEX is going to be the 2011 1 ounce Somali African elephant. You can see it's available for $35.15. That's just a little bit over $3 over spot. I think right now we're at about $32.21. So you can see we're starting to rally again in the overnight. So that's about $3 above spot. I really like the coin. I have a number of these coins, and they really even look better in person than they do on this page. So that's going to be my favorite of the day from APMEX, and that's $35.15 for 500 or more and a bank wire. Now over on Gainesville, my favorite, and this is going to be the best price, of course, of all three sites for this particular issue. My favorite is going to be this 2012 1 ounce Canadian Cougar, and you can see it's $34.74, and that's with the bank wire price. And so that's only $2.45 over spot. That's really going to be a hard deal to beat. This, in my opinion, is kind of a potential sleeper. I believe that there's 500,000 of them, but don't quote me on that. But I think the Wildlife series, if you saw the Wolf series, they're now $60. You can't get them for under $60. So that's going to be my pick from Gainesville. And the last one is going to be Provident, and that's going to be the 2012 1 ounce Philharmonic. And those never change, so for me, that's kind of a bullion play. There really, in my mind, isn't a lot of numismatic potential, but it's not a bad coin. So you can see here, with 500 or more, with the cash discount price, you've got $34.24. So that's $2 over spot. So that's an incredible deal on that coin. I don't see how you can go wrong right here, $199 over spot. So those are going to be my three picks: the Philharmonic at Provident, the Cougar on Gainesville, and the African Wildlife Series at APMEX. Now, I wanted to go over to the story of the night, but before I do that, I want to look at the question of the night, and this is from George Silver. Silver, the cheaper alternative to gold. Dear Brother John, why do I continually hear or read that silver is the cheaper alternative to gold, or that silver is the poor man's gold? They are both precious metals, but gold is gold and silver is silver. If I have the currency equivalent of 55 ounces of silver, I can just as easily buy 1 ounce of gold. If I want silver, I buy silver. If I want gold, I buy gold. I certainly do not buy silver if I want to buy gold, and vice versa. Okay, if I can buy a 1 ounce silver coin, I might buy that instead of a very small piece of gold, but that would hardly be a great store of wealth. A person can store their wealth in silver or gold. They are equal for this purpose. The only thing they are not equal in is their weight for the amount of money spent. The propaganda that silver is a poor alternative to gold should be rebutted on every occasion. Well, that's an interesting conjecture. I don't completely agree. Now, what is a store of wealth? That's going to be the basis for buying these. Of course, there are going to be different reasons for wanting silver than wanting gold. Traditionally, gold is the money of kings. Silver is the money of merchants. So gold was traditionally used for very large purchases such as land or other things like that, while silver was the money of everyday commerce. Now, that's not going to hold true today. Gold primarily is the holding of central banks, while silver has been primarily demonetized and is used in industry. Now, if you follow an FOFOA type of argument, FOFOA claims that the reason that gold is going to outperform silver is because that's what the central banks want, and that's what the central banks buy. I have a different view. I actually believe that silver is going to outperform gold by a very large margin. And the reason why I believe that's the case is because there's nothing that I can think of that gold has that silver doesn't. But there are plenty of things that I can think of that silver has that gold doesn't. For one thing, silver has a tremendous number of uses, much more than gold. You have to remember that silver is the number one reflective, the number one electronically conductive, and the number one thermally conductive element in the universe. Now, it also has medicinal properties and other things. Then when you add in the rarity, and I personally believe there is less silver above ground than there is gold, and then you add in the industrial uses and the amount that's being consumed, and you also add in the fact that it's so low priced that it's not being recycled, and you add in the incredible ratio that is ridiculous of 55 to 1 when it's being pulled out of the ground at 10 to 1, and it's being bought by the people at $1 to $1. And to me, silver is just so much better than gold in every way that anyone can think of, that it's totally superior. And whatever purpose you have for buying, which is probably going to be a store of wealth, you have to remember that if something is a store of wealth, then what you're saying is that it is projected to increase more under an inflationary environment or decrease less during a deflationary environment. In other words, the value of it is not completely priced in. Now, I believe that the value of gold is much more priced in than the value of silver. So for that reason, I believe that silver is actually a much better store of wealth than gold, because a lot of that store of wealth value is priced into gold, but it's not at all priced into silver. So I somewhat agree and somewhat disagree, but hands down, I prefer silver under any scenario, inflation, deflation, or just plain growth or sideways movement, and for a number of inherent reasons that, in my opinion, make silver superior to gold. Now let's get on to the main story of the night, and that's going to be the student loan debt, and that is a story that has been making the rounds. Now, before I go into this SHTF plan article, I want to look at this other article that's on Azizonomics because it gives us some of the history. Let me read a little bit of this. Student debt levels continue to soar. In 2012, they hit $1 trillion for the first time ever, but college education isn't reaping the rewards it once did. According to AP, about 1.5 million, or 53.6%, of bachelor's degree holders under the age of 25 last year were jobless or unemployed, the highest share in at least 11 years. And real wages have fallen for recent college graduates. Then we get a table below. This is an interesting interview with a law professor, and of course the law school is much, much worse. You can find many discussion boards out there of discouraged law students and the incredible debts that they've incurred that they cannot pay off. I encourage you to watch that video. These are some quotes from it. Quote, "There's no incentive for private lenders to be particularly careful in who they lend money to, because they know that there's no way that whoever they lend the money to will ever be able to get rid of the debt short of dying. But just because a loan is non-dischargeable doesn't mean that the loanee will be able to repay. With labor conditions for recent graduates still quite awful, student debt defaults have climbed, the Washington Times notes. Quote, the number of borrowers defaulting on federal student loans has risen substantially, highlighting concerns that rising college costs, low graduation rates, and poor job prospects are getting more and more students over their heads in debt. The national two-year cohort default rate rose to 8.8% last year from 7% in fiscal 2008, according to figures released Monday by the Department of Education. That means that more unemployed former students will end up being hounded for debts they cannot afford to repay, yet cannot discharge through bankruptcy. If those debts had been accrued at the roulette wheel, though, they could. It wasn't always this way. Until 1976, all student loans could be discharged in bankruptcy. Until 1998, student loans could be discharged after a waiting period of 5 years. In 1998, Congress made federal student loans non-dischargeable in bankruptcy, and in 2005, it similarly extended non-dischargeability to private student loans. Since 2000, student loan debt has exploded, and private student loans have grown even faster. This presents a bigger problem than simply sending people to college who end up unemployed or underemployed. It means that capital is being misallocated, etc. So that's the very important history there of how we went from a dischargeable debt to a non-dischargeable private debt. Now, why did we go there? Well, of course, the reason why we go there, and the reason why we have all these problems, is the government. Everything the government touches, it destroys. Because government is the problem. Any one of these economic problems, if you look at them and distill them down, you're going to find that government interference is the cause of these problems. Now, if you think about any kind of a normal loan that you have an interest rate, and you have risk, and you have the ability to repay, and those are all calculated by the lender. The lender is going to try to determine what the odds are he's going to be repaid or be defaulted on, and then he's going to set the interest rate based on that. Once you have the government begin to interfere in the market by making the loan non-dischargeable, then there's no incentive for the lender to be careful at all, because the loan cannot be discharged. So again, we see a case here of government meddling, and of course the entire college system is absolutely rotten to the core. It is filled with government grants, and anybody who's been through it, I've been through it. I spent 4 years in undergraduate studies and also spent 3 years in law school, and I can assure you that the entire system is rotten to the core. It is a complete government-based system. They teach theories that are demonstrably false in many of the disciplines, and of course it's just a money spigot from the government. It's an utterly corrupt system. It should be completely folded up and destroyed. But the question is, how do these students deal with this debt? Now, that's going to be very difficult, and you can see on this SHTF plan article that the feedback loop is beginning to affect the colleges themselves. I'll read a little bit. Austerity measures, though unpopular and not discussed by government officials and media pundits, are in full effect across a broad spectrum of services and industries. In many parts of the country, local governments are being forced to lay off or cut the salaries of thousands of emergency personnel. Education spending cuts across debt behemoths like California, Illinois, and Michigan are forcing elementary and high school classrooms to capacities exceeding 30 or 40 students at a time, and removing subjects like art, music, physical education from school schedules. Towns and cities all over America are declaring bankruptcy on almost a weekly basis. Government-sponsored healthcare systems are feeling the pressure, with major cuts in access to key prescription medications becoming the norm. and going down. In addition to nearly $1 billion in state funding cuts for college students, the progressive state of California and others are now facing massive job cuts and salary reductions across the board. This is only going to get worse. It can be no other way. More than 470,000 community college students are beginning the fall semester on waiting lists, unable to get into courses they need, according to a survey of California's two-year colleges that captures the system struggling amid severe budget cuts. California's community college system, the nation's largest, has suffered about $809 million in state funding cuts since 2008. It faces another $338 million hit mid-year if voters reject a tax measure on November ballot supported by Governor Jerry Brown. And it goes on, of course, it talks about the tuition bubble. Despite their best hopes for change, it's not a question of if further cuts are required, but rather when those cuts take place. In fact, those cuts are taking place now, as evidenced by the 500,000 California college students sitting on the sidelines. As this college tuition bubble detonates, so too will the thousands of jobs it supports. As we noted in the summer of 2010, we can expect local and state governments to lay off at least 2 million people, which will further accelerate the depressionary feedback loop. So it's a terrible situation, and of course, with so many of the students graduating and not being able to have jobs with their college degrees, you have to ask the question, what is the college degree worth? And if you research the blogs out there about the law schools, those law school degrees are pretty much not worth the paper they're written on. There just aren't any jobs available. A lot of these students have over $100,000 in debt. Now, can we blame these students? Yes, of course we can, because they have to be responsible for being stupid and gullible and making foolish decisions. But at the same time, these probably are the least likely to see through the mind control and nonsense sent to them by the government and the schools. So it really is a tragedy that we're victimizing the youngest members of our society by exploiting them and forcing them, well, not forcing them, but once they enter into the system, we're forcing them to repay and not allowing them to discharge through bankruptcy. And of course, that's because of the government interference, and the government had to interfere because the product that was being sold simply wasn't worth what it was being sold for, and therefore people would default, and they couldn't have that, so they've now made them slaves, essentially. So what are they going to do? Well, the first thing, if you're a young person, you should studiously avoid college unless you can go to some low-cost community college and get a useful degree, preferably a trade school degree, a degree that has to do with a job that is actually out there, and you can leave the rest of the stuff for the eggheads because it's just not going to give you a job. Now, as far as for the people who have already gone through the system and they're pretty much trapped, I don't really know what the answer is. There were a number of people who were, when the costs were fairly low, were borrowing and establishing credit, putting them on credit cards, paying off their student loans, and bankrupting out of the credit cards. That's a possibility for some of those people, but that door's rapidly closing. The other thing that these people could do is either fake their own deaths, disappear, or leave the country. I think that door will probably close as well fairly soon. And so we're probably going to be looking at a situation where the government, because of its malfeasance and its corruption in this area, is probably going to force a very large number of people into the black market. It's probably going to be in the interest of these people who have $100,000+ worth of student loan debt. And you have to remember that once they default on these loans, these private groups can throw on $25,000 penalties. There's nothing they can do. So a lot of these people are probably going to disappear into the black market. Something akin to what has happened with the quote-unquote deadbeat dads the men in America's matriarchal society, which gives all power to women in a divorce situation, takes a man's children away, makes him pay the state for them, and takes away his ability to see them, which isn't enforced by the courts. So what a large number of these men do is simply drop out of the system. I think we'll probably see that begin to happen as these student loan debts, they just can't be repaid, and the people who owe them will probably begin to drop out of the system, disappear, or leave the country. And of course, that's happening because of government interference. The government is always the problem, and it's clearly the problem here. So back to the silver chart. We're still rallying in strength. As I pointed out in past videos, don't be surprised if we get a rapid move to 34 and 36 and then a test of the 3750 level. Yes, we are in a slight overbought condition here on the daily. You can see we could turn down, but based on the recent strength, my guesstimate is that probably we will not turn down until we get a test of this 3750 level. And we'll talk to you next time.